You know, driving around Ashley County, Arkansas today, it feels like a peaceful, rural place. Maybe always has been.
Seems that way on the surface, yeah.
But then you start peeling back the layers, especially, when you look at the Civil War and you find this history that's, well, anything but quiet.
Exactly.
And that's really our focus for this deep dive. It was sparked by a message we got from K. Brad Barfield over at ACN, Ashley County Now.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he mentioned sharing some Ashley County-centric Civil War info. And he said, it might not be everyone's favorite topic, maybe, but definitely a smart one to know about.
That's a good way to put it. It's important history.
Totally. So our mission here is to really dig into Ashley County's experience during the war. Not just like battles and dates, but what drove them? What did it cost the people there? And how is it remembered locally?
And we've got some really interesting information to work with.
We do. I think there are going to be some surprises for you listening.
Yeah.
Like just the sheer number of men who served from this one county, and even a skirmish that brought the war right to their doorstep. So, yeah, thanks, Brad, for prompting this one.
It really is remarkable, isn't it, how a place that might seem a little off the beaten path today was so deeply involved in the biggest events of that era.
Absolutely.
Our sources, they paint this picture of Ashley County just before the war, down in southeastern Arkansas. Fertile land, Hamburg's the county seat, and the economy, mostly cotton and timber.
Big drivers, yeah.
But as Brad probably knows well, this prosperity, it was built on a very specific foundation, one that today we clearly see as morally reprehensible.
Okay, let's really get into that foundation.
Right.
Because the information we have is pretty stark. Ashley County in the 1850s. Heavily reliant on chattel slavery.
Heavily.
The 1860 census numbers. Total population around 8,590. And of those, 3,761 were enslaved African Americans. That's nearly 44%.
Almost half the population. And think about the growth just before that the population had exploded since 1850.
Right. So you can just see how deeply, deeply ingrained this system was. Not just money, but socially, culturally.
It's structured everywhere.
Imagine the disruption. Just the idea of losing that unpaid labor force. For the people who owned slaves, it wasn't just about wealth. It was their whole social order, their daily life.
Yeah.
That fear of abolition must have been palpable. Huge.
Absolutely immense. And you have to connect that dependence directly to the ideologies taking hold, this strong belief in states' rights, pro-slavery arguments.
It wasn't abstract for them.
Not at all. In that context, states' rights really meant the right to maintain and control the institution of slavery without the federal government interfering.
Makes sense.
And you had settlers coming in from older southern states, likely bringing those views with them, reinforcing it all. So you get this pretty unified front leaning towards the Confederacy.
But it wasn't completely monolithic, right? The sources hint at some, complexities or contradictions.
Yes, exactly. Glimmers of complexity. You have that Guy versus Daniel case in early '61, an actual successful lawsuit for freedom by enslaved people within the system.
Which is kind of amazing.
It is. But then set against that, you have the horrific reality of something like the lynching of 2 enslaved men back in 1857. Brutal, extra-legal violence. It shows the tension, the control, the inherent violence of the system itself.
Yeah, stark contrast. Okay, so that's the backdrop. How does Ashley County actually move towards secession?
Well, a key piece is their delegate to the Arkansas Secession Convention, M.L. Hawkins.
M.L. Hawkins, okay.
And the crucial detail, he was a significant slaveholder himself, owned 35 enslaved individuals.
Wow. So his personal interest.
Directly aligned with the dominant economic interests of the county, absolutely. It's almost certain his strong push for secession at that convention reflected what the powerful voices back in Ashley County wanted. Protecting their way of life, their economic engine.
Now, this is interesting, too. Arkansas as a state didn't immediately jump to secede, did it?
No, initially there was caution. They actually planned for a popular vote on the issue first.
So what changed?
Fort Sumter. And then Lincoln's call for volunteers to put down the rebellion. That was the tipping point.
The federal coercion argument.
Precisely. That shifted the mood dramatically in Arkansas, and you have to assume in Ashley County, too. It went from a debate to feeling like they were being forced, like their rights as a state were being violated.
So the convention comes back together.
They reconvened May 6, 1861, and the vote for secession passed overwhelmingly, 65-5.
And Hawkins is Ashley County's voice in that yes vote.
He is, and Arkansas officially joins the Confederacy shortly after. But to really grasp the why behind it all, You need to look at the changes they made to the Arkansas Constitution right after seceding.
Right, that's telling. It wasn't just swapping United States for Confederate States, was it?
No, not at all. The changes to the Declaration of Rights, I mean, changing all free men specifically to all free white men, or Indian, and making it legally impossible to emancipate enslaved people.
It lays it bare.
It really does. It shows that the core drivers were fundamentally about preserving a society based on, well, white supremacy and the economics of slavery, not just some abstract political theory.
So the decisions made, Ashley counties in the Confederacy, what does mobilization look like?
It looks significant, really significant. They raised 13 military companies just from within the county.
13 from one county.
13. Now think about that relative to the total white male population back in 1860. The estimates suggest maybe around 781 men enlisted. That's a huge commitment of their available manpower.
Wow. And any particular units stand out?
Definitely. The big one is the 3rd Arkansas Infantry Regiment. It holds this really unique distinction.
Okay, what's that?
It was the only Arkansas regiment to serve the entire war out east in Virginia under Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia.
A whole war. Out east. That is significant for an Arkansas unit.
Very. And Ashley County had a major presence in it. At least 4 companies traced their origins back there. You had Company A, the Arkansas Travelers, Company B, the Berlin Beauregards, Company K, and Company L, though L got merged into A later.
And how many men served in that regiment overall?
The total muster roll was about 1,353 men over the course of the war.
That's a lot of men. Who led them?
For a crucial period, it was Colonel Van H. Manning. He was actually a lawyer from Hamburg before the war. He helped organize the regiment and took command later on.
And their service record, where did they fight?
Oh, they were in the thick of it. Early on, Cheat Mountain, then the Shenandoah Valley Campaign under Stonewall Jackson, the 7 Days battles near Richmond, Antietam.
Petersburg, yeah. Brutal.
Incredibly brutal. They actually got commended for an aggressive charge there, but the cost, 182 casualties just in that one fight.
Oof.
Then Gettysburg, they fought in the Devil's Den area, suffered about 35% casualties, killed, wounded, missing. Colonel Manning himself was wounded there.
Keep showing up in the action.
He does. They continued through the Overland Campaign Wilderness, where Manning was wounded again and captured this time, Spotsylvania, Cold Harbor, then the long, grinding siege of Petersburg.
Just relentless campaigning.
Absolutely. And the final tally is just staggering. By the time Lee surrendered at Appomattox, only about 144 men from the 3rd Arkansas were left to be paroled.
From over 1,300. Just 144.
It really drives home the human cost, doesn't it? Especially for a smaller county like Ashley. These weren't just numbers. They were farmers, lawyers, neighbors, fighting and dying so far from home.
And it sounds like they earned their reputation. Overcame maybe some initial doubts.
They definitely did. They became known as a really distinguished, hard-fighting regiment, showed a commitment that went way beyond just defending Arkansas. They were all in for the Confederate cause.
Okay, so the 3rd Arkansas is key. Were there other major units with Ashley County ties?
Yes. Another important one was the 9th Arkansas Infantry Regiment. This one served primarily in the Western theater places like Mississippi, Tennessee.
So closer to home, relatively speaking.
Right. Company K of the 9th Arkansas was raised in Ashley County. They saw heavy action, too, at places like Shiloh, huge losses there. Corinth, Champions Hill, and then later with the Army of Tennessee through Georgia and the Carolinas. Battles like Kennesaw Mountain, Nashville, Bentonville, they were hit hard, especially towards the end.
So intense fighting on multiple fronts for Ashley County men.
Absolutely. And the records mention some conflicting info about whether they were at Port Hudson, which just highlights, how piecing together these detailed histories can be tricky sometimes.
Yeah, fog of war, fog of memory too, I guess.
Definitely.
And besides those 2 main infantry regiments.
There were others. Men from Ashley County served in the 2nd Arkansas Cavalry, the 12th Arkansas Cavalry, the 8th Arkansas Infantry Battalion, the 37th Arkansas Infantry, even some in a Louisiana Partisan Ranger unit.
Wow, really spread out.
Yeah. And you also had Tyner's Company, which was a home guard unit, more focused on local defense, policing, that sort of thing. So it paints a picture of full community mobilization across different types of service.
Okay, let's talk about some of the individuals. Colonel Van H. Manning obviously looms large.
He really does. Hamburg lawyer turned soldier. rises to command the prestigious 3rd Arkansas. His bravery is mentioned in official reports from Antietam and Gettysburg.
And wounded multiple times, captured.
Right. He really embodied that leadership from the front. And the fact that his regiment gained national recognition definitely reflected back on Arkansas soldiers generally. He clearly made a significant mark. And interestingly, she moved to Mississippi after the war and was even elected to the U.S. Congress.
Quite a post-war path. Is he remembered locally?
Yes, there's a historical marker in Hamburg mentioning him and the 3rd Arkansas. His story is pretty well documented.
Okay, who else stands out in the sources?
Well, there's Captain Robert J. Withers, a very different kind of contribution.
Oh.
He was a Confederate naval captain, but focused on the inland rivers.
Ah, river warfare. Crucial in the West.
Absolutely. Before the war, Withers actually owned and piloted steamboats on the Mississippi, the Wichita, the Saline rivers. He knew those waters like the back of his hand.
So invaluable knowledge for the Confederacy.
Exactly. His steamboat, the Morgan Nelson, was pressed into service. They used it to transport supplies, move cotton. Apparently, they even sometimes flew both Union and Confederate flags to get through patrols.
Oh. Wartime ingenuity.
Totally. And there's a great story about an incident at Longview Landing. Union cavalry were approaching, so Withers ordered his crew to dump bales of cotton into the Saline River to keep it from being captured. It floated downstream, and later they managed to fish it out.
Resourceful. So his role was more logistical.
Primarily logistical, yes, but absolutely vital because of that river expertise. And the sources make a point to distinguish him from a Colonel Robert Withers Harper, another Confederate officer with a similar name. Easy to get them confused.
Good clarification. Okay, so we have a high-ranking officer, or river captain. What about the average soldier?
That's where someone like Private William H. Potter comes in. He served in the 3rd Arkansas, just like Colonel Manning.
An enlisted man.
Right. He represents, the vast majority of soldiers whose individual stories aren't always recorded in bold print. We know he was wounded, survived the war, came back to Ashley County, and lived there until 1904.
And he's buried locally.
Yes, in Bethel Cemetery. His grave serves as this tangible, personal link to the war, a reminder of the cost for the ordinary guys. It's quite a contrast to the public memorials for officers like Manning.
Yeah, different scales of remembrance. And we have to mention M.L. Hawkins again, right? The delegate.
Absolutely. Can't understand Ashley County's entry into the war without him. Not a military figure, but his political role was decisive.
As the delegate who voted for secession.
Exactly. And remembering his status as a major slaveholder, it really connects the political decision directly back to the economic and social interests that were driving the county towards the Confederacy. His vote had huge consequences.
Okay, so Ashley County is overwhelmingly Confederate in its actions and leadership. What about the other side? Was there any Union allegiance?
That's a really difficult question to answer based on this information. The sources are pretty clear that identifying Unionists in Ashley County is challenging.
Because Confederate sentiment was so strong.
Exactly. Strong sentiment, deep ties to slavery, widespread mobilization for the Confederacy. It's very different from, say, northern Arkansas, where Union support was much more concentrated and visible. It would have been incredibly dangerous for someone in Ashley County proper to side with the Union.
The information mentions Baxter's 4th Arkansas Mounted Infantry, a Union unit. Is there a connection?
Well, the roster lists some soldiers with a residence noted as Ashley Independence Cart 1860.
Ashley/Independence. That sounds ambiguous.
It is. And the analysis strongly suggests that Ashley here almost certainly refers to Ashley Township, which is located within Independence County geographically far away from Ashley County itself.
Ah, so it's likely a case of confusing the township name with the county name.
That seems the most probable explanation based on this source. There's no definitive proof here that these men were actually from the Ashley County we're discussing.
So no confirmed Union soldiers from Ashley County in these specific records?
Not confirmed, no. It would take much deeper, probably genealogical research, digging into individual family records to potentially uncover any such cases.
But if there were any?
Anyone from Ashley County proper who did choose the Union side would have shown extraordinary courage and faced enormous risks both during and after the war. Their stories, if they exist, are likely buried deep.
Okay, so the war effort is predominantly Confederate. How did the war physically touch Ashley County itself? Were there battles fought there?
Not major battles in the way we think of Gettysburg or Vicksburg. But the war did come directly to the county in at least one significant incident, the skirmish at Longview.
Longview. That name came up with Captain Withers and the cotton.
Same place. This happened March 30th, 1864. It was part of a Union expedition coming down from Pine Bluff, led by a Colonel Powell Clayton.
Union cavalry.
Yes, elements of the 1st Indiana and 5th Kansas Cavalry. They attacked Confederate forces gathered at the Saline River landing there at Longview.
And what was the outcome?
It was a clear Union victory. They captured around 260 Confederate prisoners, took about 300 horses and mules, seized a Confederate payroll worth something like $60,000, and crucially destroyed the Confederates' pontoon bridge across the river.
That sounds like a pretty successful raid. A big blow locally.
It was. It really highlighted the vulnerability of the Confederate interior, boosted Union morale in the region, and hampered Confederate logistics by taking out that bridge. It clearly made an impact because it's specifically mentioned on the historical marker in Hamburg today.
So even without huge battles, the war was definitely felt. What about the broader social and economic impact?
Oh, profound. You see it in the population numbers, actually. Ashley County's population declined between 1860 and 1870, went down by over 500 people.
Reflecting casualties, people moving away.
Exactly. Casualties, displacement, maybe lower birth rates, and economically, the sources just say significant damage. The biggest piece, of course, was the end of slavery. Emancipation in 1865 freed those 3,761 people, completely dismantling the labor system the county's economy was built on.
A massive transformation.
Massive. Plus, you had disruptions to agriculture, the timber industry, manpower shortages because so many men were away fighting, and then Union occupation from 1863 to 65 would have strained resources even further.
And what happened after the war? During Reconstruction? Was it smooth?
Far from it. The sources describe significant resistance from the white population to federal Reconstruction policies.
How did that manifest?
Well, Ashley County's representative in the state legislature voted against ratifying the 14th Amendment in 1868. There was widespread unrest, even violence. Things got so bad after the 1868 election that Governor Clayton declared martial law in Ashley County and 13 others.
Martial law.
Yes. There was even an attack on the Hamburg courthouse. The state militia had to intervene. It was a really turbulent, violent period.
Deep divisions clearly persisted.
Deep divisions. And even when a new state constitution was drafted, the delegates from Ashley County were among those who refused to sign it. It shows just how contested that whole era was. And sadly, this period also saw the beginnings of long-term racial violence and lynchings in the area.
A difficult legacy. Did the economy eventually recover?
It did eventually. Timber and agriculture rebounded over time. And then you see the rise of the wood products industry, especially around crosset, starting in the 1890s. That became a major economic driver later on.
So how is all this complex history, the war, Reconstruction, remembered in Ashley County today? What are the memorials?
There are a few physical markers. That one at the Hamburg courthouse, dedicated fairly recently in 2015, it explicitly mentions Ashley County in the Civil War and focuses heavily on the 3rd Arkansas Infantry, its unique service, Colonel Manning, the high casualties.
So a definite Confederate heritage focus there.
Seems that way from the description, yeah. Interestingly, though, the main Ashley County War Memorial in the Hamburg City Park is dedicated to veterans of 20th century wars, not the Civil War.
Different eras, different focus.
Right. And then you have the more personal points of memory, like Private William H. Potter's grave out in Bethel Cemetery. A quiet reminder.
Any other forms of remembrance?
Well, there's an important archival record, the Ashley County Maimed Soldiers List.
Maimed Soldiers List. What was that?
It was compiled in 1867 by the state. It lists Confederate soldiers from the county who were disabled and eligible for state-funded artificial limbs.
Wow. That's incredibly poignant.
Isn't it? It's this stark, official documentation of the physical toll of the war. It provides a partial list of disabled veterans, shows the long-term consequences, highlights early efforts at veteran welfare, and just humanizes the cost in a very direct way.
Beyond battlefield glory, the real lasting injury.
Exactly. And then you also have the influence of local histories written later on, like Goodspeed's histories from the late 19th century.
How do they shape memory?
Those books often included biographical sketches of prominent residents, and they made a point of detailing their Confederate war service. It became part of their public persona, almost a badge of honor. It helped solidify that Confederate narrative as the dominant way the war was remembered locally for a long time.
Okay, so summing this all up, Ashley County's story in the Civil War is really one of deep commitment to the Confederacy, right? Huge numbers serving, especially in that hard-fighting 3rd Arkansas.
Definitely a major contribution of manpower and resources to the Confederate cause.
And the war brought significant disruption back home, that Longview skirmish, the economic upheaval, the loss of population, and then a really difficult contested Reconstruction period.
A period of profound transformation and conflict that reshaped the county.
And the memory of it today seems largely focused on the Confederate experience, through markers and older histories, though records like that maimed soldiers list offer a glimpse into the human cost.
It's a complex tapestry of memory, with certain threads definitely more prominent than others.
And thinking back to Brad Barfield's point about this being Ashley County-centric,
Hmm.
doing this deep dive really shows how vital that local perspective is, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just a footnote to the big battles.
Not at all. What happened in counties like Ashley was the Civil War. In many ways, it was the sum total of these local experiences, these individual commitments and sacrifices, the impact on these specific communities. That's the fabric of the larger conflict.
Yeah, it makes you think.
It really does. And maybe a final thought for you listening is, what do these very specific local stories like Ashley County's reveal about the broader American experience of the Civil War? By zooming in on one place, you see the connections to slavery, the scale of mobilization, the devastating human cost, the enduring struggles of Reconstruction, maybe in a clearer way than just looking at the grand narrative.
It encourages you to look closer at your own community's history, perhaps.
Exactly. What layers are there? What stories haven't been fully told or understood? It's a powerful reminder that history is lived locally, even during nation-shaping events.